Hello and welcome to the Fit to Transform podcast, where you learn how to train and diet effectively and, most importantly, how to maintain those results for life, once and for all. I'm Nikias Tomasiello, a transgender training and nutrition coach working online with anyone who's ready for a true lifestyle transformation, anywhere they may be in the world. As a friendly reminder, any and all information provided is for educational purposes only. You should consult with your doctor before implementing any changes to your diet and exercise program. With that disclaimer out of the way, thank you for being here. Now grab yourself a cup of tea or pre-workouts and enjoy. Hey there, welcome back to the podcast. In today's episode, I want to tell you a story. I want to tell you my story. So far, I've been sharing a lot about successful fat loss methods. You've met one of my clients, Corey, but you've not really met me. So today, I want to share more about my fitness journey, which plays a huge role, as you might imagine, in why I do what I do now, why I coach people, and why I love it so much, and what sets me apart from other coaches. Just so you know, and you might not be surprised about this, but I also wrote an article about my story. It's titled From Anorexia and Gender Dysphoria to Bodybuilding and Self-Acceptance, and I'm going to put a link in the show notes so that you can read it if you want. So let's start from the beginning. I was born in Italy, in a small town not far from Venice. I was assigned female at birth, and so I was raised as a girl. And I didn't realize that I was a transgender man until I was about 22, and that was 2018. I grew up in a very Italian home, living with my mother and my two younger brothers. In Italy, we don't really have sports in school like you would in America, for example, but we have separate classes that children, teenagers, and adults can go to in their own time. So ever since I was a child, my earliest memory of doing sports is from when I was 3. I was always involved in some sort of activity because both of my parents wanted me to be active. They thought that that would be healthy for me. So I started with swimming, and then I did volleyball. I practiced judo for 2 years, and then I took a break from team sports because I honestly didn't enjoy the team environment, and I took up endurance running. I did a year of lifting weights in the gym with a free program that I was given to me by a personal trainer. The program wasn't great. I found the gym very boring. I didn't know anything about it at the time, so I stopped, went back to running. I did Fitbox for a year, and then I moved to England in 2015 to start university. Throughout all these years of physical activity and various sports, to be completely honest with you, I never enjoyed it. I could never feel connected to my body because it doesn't come naturally to me. I'm much more of an intellectual person. I struggle to be present in the moment within my own body. I was also an overweight child, and I was teased for it. And finally, I simply wasn't good at sports. And I've always been very ambitious and eager to please. So not being naturally talented at something and struggling as much as I did made me really not like the idea of doing sports. So the only reason why I was doing it at the time was because my parents wanted me to. And then when I became a teenager and I became more and more uncomfortable with all the teasing about my excess weight, I decided to get more into physical activity, not because, again, I wanted to, but because I was told that it would be useful in order to lose weight. My mother has always been into nutrition and health as well, so she suggested that I watch my portions. So that's what I did. I decided to take up endurance running and to eat less in order to lose weight. That was something that I became really good at. Too good at it for my own good. I wasn't educated on the proper, healthy way to lose weight. So, what happened was that I got really good at eating very little and exercising a lot. That's what I mean by being too good for my own good. I was very consistent with these two ultimately unsustainable practices. So, between the age of around 15 and 16, I lost a huge amount of weight. I got to an unhealthy weight for my height, and that resulted in a host of negative health consequences, such as I lost my period and my sex hormone levels completely tanked. Fast forward a few years later, when I was about 20, I decided that I wanted to finally and fully recover from my eating disorder. At this point, around when I was 17 or 18, I was weight restored, which means that I managed to regain enough weight not to be considered underweight anymore. However, although I might not have had underweight anymore, my mind was certainly not in a healthy place with food and exercise. I was still exercising more than I wanted to. I was abusing cardio, and I was also eating very little and from a very small list, a very short list of foods that I considered quote unquote super healthy, and I wouldn't eat anything outside of that. At this point, I would say that I didn't have an eating disorder anymore, but I very much had disordered eating. To give you some perspective on this, when I was at my worst, I weighed about 82 pounds. I've never actually shared my lowest weight with anyone publicly, either on social media or in an article. This is the first time ever. But yes, my lowest weight was 82 pounds, and I'm 5 feet tall. And when I saw that weight on the scale for the first time, that was when I burst into tears, and I got so scared for my own health, mental and physical, and I decided that I needed to recover. At this point in time, I wasn't counting my calories, but I couldn't have been eating much more than maybe 1,000, 1,200 calories per day, if that's. I was exercising 3 times a day. All 3 times it was cardio. All I wanted to do with exercise was to sweat, to make sure that I was expending as many calories as possible. And therefore, whenever I felt that kind of exertion, I reassured myself that I would stay slim. Again, by the time I was 17 or 18, I was weight restored because I reached out to my parents. I admitted to them that I had a problem. We sought out some professional help, and I got back to the weight that I needed to be, not to be considered underweight, but I was a long way from changing my relationship with fitness for the better. And as I was saying, this began to happen when I was around in my early 20s. When I was around 20, I decided that I was still exercising more than I would have liked to, and I was still doing it out of a place of fear. I was eating more, but I was still eating from a very restricted list of quote unquote clean foods. And I wanted to eat in a way that I would enjoy, not a way that was born out of fear. That's when I began to do some digging into exactly why I had developed this eating disorder, because honestly, it had always mystified me. I really didn't understand what was going on because I spent so long reading blog articles by people with eating disorder, particularly girls with eating disorders. I read books, I listened to podcasts, I watched movies, and a common thread that I found was that these girls wanted to be slim and pretty, and they thought that the aesthetic of being extremely skinny was pleasing. Whereas I have no pictures of the time when I was at my lowest weight because I was so ashamed of the way I looked. When I saw the number on the scale and I saw that it was low, it filled me with relief because I was really afraid of gaining weight. But when I looked at myself in the mirror, I just was not comfortable with what I saw. So, through some long and hard self reflection, it occurred to me that what I was comfortable with was that I didn't have a menstrual cycle and that my chest was really flat. essentially I didn't have feminine characteristics any longer. I had no curves, I had no estrogen or progesterone to speak of. These are the main female sex hormones. And that led to me questioning my gender. When I was a teenager, I first came out as a lesbian, and I knew very little at that point about what being transgender meant. During my university years, I came into contact with transgender, non binary, gender fluid, and other gender diverse people, and I decided that I felt comfortable with the gender fluid label. However, once I got to 20 years old and I started thinking about my eating disorder and how that tied into my gender identity and the way I saw myself, I realized that deep down I'd always known that being gender fluid wasn't my truth. It was a surrogate for my true identity. I was afraid of coming out as a transgender man because I didn't want to disappoint my parents or the people that knew me, my friends, all of my loved ones. At the same time, if I said that I was gender fluid, I didn't need to come out to my family or my loved ones, only to the people that I felt comfortable coming out to. And I didn't necessarily need to change too much about myself because I'd always presented in a more masculine way. And whether people thought that that was because I was gender fluid or because I was a butch lesbian or a tomboyish girl, I didn't necessarily need to say anything or justify it. So that's why it was an easy label to take on at the time. So finally, in 2018, in May, I asked myself if I could be anyone I wanted, regardless of what anybody else said, who would I be? And the answer came to me right away. It was pure instinct, and it was, I would be a guy. There was no doubt in my mind. And that's when it finally dawned on me that I was a transgender man. And everything I had brought upon myself and my body with the eating disorder, the excessive exercise, and the restrictive eating, it was all because of gender dysphoria or this deep discomfort that I had about my own body. I was trying to tear my body down because I couldn't live with it. Because to me, it felt like it was the wrong body. That question that I asked myself and that answer that I gave myself were pivotal to my fitness and personal growth journey. They made me realize that there must be a way to be comfortable in my body. There must be a way to be at home and not feel like a stranger in somebody else's house every time I walked around in my flesh because I had no other flesh. And finally, I just wanted to get rid of these freaking disordered eating habits that were eroding my sanity. At this point, I didn't know anything too specific about proper nutrition and proper exercise to accomplish what I wanted to accomplish. And I started with the basics. First, I asked myself what kind of exercise actually interested me. And I realized that whenever I went into the gym and tried to lift some dumbbells and do some bicep curls, I found it so much more interesting and fascinating than cardio. I really didn't enjoy the same movements repeated over time, like during a run or on the cross trainer. I found it boring, and I also found it simply extremely exhausting, to be honest. And obviously, I was doing it for the purpose of tiring myself out. So I'm not saying that this is what cardio is like for everyone. Far from it. But that was the reality of cardio for me at that time. And in comparison, lifting weights seemed such an interesting endeavor. However, it also appeared to be much more complex, and I really like to do things properly when I get into them. So I dove deep into how to create a training program for a beginner, how nutrition would affect training, how I could use training to build my body up and not tear it down any longer. I really wanted to build a house that I could live comfortably in instead of trying to tear down a house that I hated. I discovered that bodybuilding is a regimented discipline, and I love structure. I'm very good at planning. I don't find it stressful at all. Actually, planning is one of my favorite activities. It's simply the way that I understand the world around me. So I thrived on creating my exercise program, on taking care of my diet, hitting my calories, hitting my macros. I finally started seeing actual physical results that I enjoyed. I felt better mentally and physically. I started getting rid of all these diet rules that I've always had, like you can't eat carbs in the evening, or you must eat every 3 hours, or you won't be able to stoke your metabolism. You must walk 30,000 steps a day. Yes, I was clocking over 30,000 steps a day at one point. They were ridiculous rules, and I was finally starting to leave them behind and to replace them with actual science. And I became so passionate about that process that that summer in June 2018, I began my first beginner bodybuilding program, which at the time I was doing at home. And after about a year of gaining weight by trying an intuitive eating approach, I got to a point where I felt uncomfortable with the weight that I had gained, and I also felt confident enough in my new knowledge and my new understanding of what I wanted for myself that I decided to try a diet, but to try it in a sustainable and healthy way for once. And that was my first bodybuilding fat loss phase. I was a beginner, so I was able to lose body fat at the same time as I was building muscle, which definitely spurred me on because they were great results. And by the time I was done with the diet, it was autumn, and my final year of university was starting. And that's when I signed up for a fitness instructor course that my university was offering. I went to university to study creative and media writing, and up until then, I'd had no interest in pursuing anything else. But through this transformative experience, I realized how much I enjoyed the science of training and nutrition, how good I was at building plans, and how consistent I could be with it, and how fulfilling that was for me. And so I started questioning, well, if I find it so fulfilling to do it for myself, what would it be like to do it for others? So I took on that fitness instructor course and then moved on to my personal training diploma, which took me about just under a year to complete. At the same time, I was finishing my university degree and I got my nutrition qualifications as well. And then in August 2019, I had completed all the qualifications that I needed and I decided to launch my current business, Fit to Transform. And as they say, since then, the rest is history. While I was growing my business, I kept working on growing myself. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to be as small as possible. I actually wanted to build some solid muscle. So after that first fat loss phase, which lasted from June to about October 2018, I decided to start my first muscle gaining phase, and I fully intended on gaining weight, which didn't quite happen in the beginning because you can have all of the best intentions in the world, but if you've been raised feeling uncomfortable and being teased for being overweight and you lose a lot of weight and you're able to maintain that weight loss, you are shit scared of regaining weight. And I certainly was. I had read so much about the science and behind gaining weight and gaining muscle and the importance of a slight caloric surplus and a gradual increase in weight to maximize your muscle gain potential, which means that you can build muscle even without gaining weight, but it is more efficient if you allow yourself to gain a little bit of weight and a little bit of fat. And I decided that for my own goals, I wanted to be more efficient. I wanted to build as much muscle as I possibly could. But again, it didn't quite work. I told myself that I was quote unquote bulking and I was in a caloric surplus, but the truth is, I would gain a pound, get scared, lower my calories a little bit just to be on the safe side, and then I would lose that pound again. So, what I did was essentially I maintained my weight for a few months. And then, unfortunately, in April 2019, I got injured. I dropped a barbell on my chest and I bruised a rib. That I was trying to do a very silly exercise in the gym and I just didn't hold on to the barbell correctly. It slipped and it hit me right in the solar plexus. That was not pleasant. So at that point, that clearly put threw a spanner in the works, but it also gave me time to reflect because I had to take a month out of the gym completely. I couldn't do any lifting at all. And it gave me time to think, okay, you've been kind of, but not really gain muscle for the last few months. You've been maintaining your weight. So what is it going to be? Are we going to get serious about this or are we not? So then, when I was able to get back into the gym, I was really serious about it. And I spent the next year and a half in a small caloric surplus. I gradually gained weight until I was able to get to the same weight that I was at the very beginning of that bodybuilding journey in 2018 when I'd begun with a fat loss phase because my goal was to get back to that weight, put the pictures side by side from 2018 to whenever it would be that I would gain that weight back and see how much muscle I had gained. And I was over the moon with the difference in my physique. I had so much more muscle and so much less fat at the same exact body weight. And I'm going to put the pictures in the description so you can see them. And I achieved that new shape in 2020, in summer 2020, about a year since I'd started that serious muscle building phase. And it would be another few months until November 2020 when I would start my first fat loss phase ever since that initial fat loss phase in 2018. And I really want to make this clear because so many people think that you need to spend a long time dieting to lose body fat in order to look lean and muscular. But the truth is, you probably need to spend a lot more time actually trying to build muscle because if you spend longer trying to lose fat, what's going to happen is that you're going to look like a smaller version of yourself with very little muscle. So in 2020, around November, I decided that I was done with a muscle gaining phase. I wanted to lose body fat and see how lean I could get and see how much muscle I had built. Because, as I said before, when you gain weight to gain muscle, you need to accept a little bit of extra body fat accumulation. So I wanted to get rid of the extra fat I put on in order to uncover the muscle underneath. And I decided to celebrate that accomplishment, the last few years of bodybuilding, with a photo shoot, which I booked for April 2021. So I essentially dieted for this photo shoot and trained for the photo shoot from my home because, well, we were in the middle of the pandemic and all of the gyms in England were shut. So I dieted from November until April. Afterwards, I decided that it was time to build muscle again. So I started another muscle building phase, which lasted slightly shorter, about 10 months, until February 2022. And at this point, I decided that I wanted to do better than I had done in my photo shoot prep of 2020 to 2021. So I embarked on another fat loss phase. I wanted to get even leaner than before and see how much muscle I had been able to build this time around. And this takes us up to the present. I'm currently still in that fat loss phase, and I have decided last minute this time, not from the beginning like the first time, and there's a reason for this, which I'll cover in a future episode. I've decided to do another photo shoot, which will be on August 18th, and I'm very excited about it. And that is the entirety of my fitness journey so far, from the ugly beginnings when I was a child feeling uncomfortable doing sports, to when I was a teenager and developed my eating disorder, to finally when I began bodybuilding, launched my own business, and truly began to thrive from a fitness perspective. I told you this story because I wanted you to be able to connect with me. I wanted to connect with you, and I wanted to give you more of an insight into why doing the job that I do as a coach is so important to me. My ambition is to make a real difference in other people's lives. I want to help you understand what's true about fitness and what isn't true. I want to help you understand that you can eat your favorite foods and also get great results. I want to help you understand that you don't need to exercise in a way that you utterly despise and out of fear, but you can exercise out of a genuine desire to improve yourself, and that you can find a type of physical activity that you enjoy. And having seen how much of a difference I've been able to make in my clients' lives since 2019, since starting this job, I truly feel like I have found my purpose in life. And that's why coaching is so important to me. And that's what sets me apart as a coach. And that's why I'm here. That's why I built my coaching business. It's because I want to make a difference. And I know that I can. So that's a wrap for today's podcast. I will record more podcasts about my own personal journey. For one, I want to tell you more about the photo shoot prep I've been doing and how it differs from my 2020 to 2021 photo shoot prep. And I want to tell you more about my muscle building phases, because after this photo shoot prep, that's what I'm planning on doing to continue building my body. But for today, I think that's enough. Thank you very much for staying with me until the end, the current end of this story. There is clearly much more to come. As always, if you want to learn more about my services, check out the links in the show notes. You'll find everything you need to know. You can connect with me on Instagram. You can visit my websites. You can email me. Please feel free to give me feedback in any way that you like, whether with a review or with a comment on my Instagram, a DM, an email. I would be delighted to connect with you on a more personal level. Lastly, if you want to support the podcast and help me reach more people, please leave a 5-star rating or review on any podcast platform that you're using. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll speak to you soon.